joining us on the Big Impacts podcast. Today we are going to be discussing the impacts of Resident Evil 4. These are my co-hosts Aaron and Michael, with Brian behind the camera. All right, let's begin.
So, thanks for introducing us to the podcast. So, Resident Evil 4 is a Japanese game made by Capcom, and the director Shinji Mikami, one who directed it. It's a direct sequel from Resident Evil 2 that came out in 1998. And Resident Evil 4, the story pretty much is a very basic, pretty much a one big escort mission. You're trying to find the president's daughter and escort her back to the homeland, pretty much. And the development of the game can best be described as like living hell, because the game had multiple delays and multiple different builds that got scrapped. The most famous being 3.5, which was most commonly referred as the Hookman build because it predominantly featured a killer with a hook. But it was too complicated because it kept going back and forth between like the real world and like this bluish type of world, and it was too advanced for the technology back then.
Like build swapping. That reminds me of Evil Within.
Yeah, I just finished that. Yeah, Evil Within 1 and 2. I just got done with Kumu mode on Evil Within 2. Yeah, I wanted to die after doing that. But yeah, it was the most ambitious Resident Evil game at the time, with a completely different style of gameplay and mechanics.
How did it impact other games?
So basically, I want to start off with something very important with motion graphics. Before this, like, the cutscenes, even in the game for 2005, were revolutionary, because this is when we got introduced to like motion capture, and well, at least way more advanced than what we had before, right? I'm pretty sure other games maybe had this, but Resident Evil 4 really pushed the limits of it. Like, I know for the Krauser fight, for instance, if you go and look at that fight, like, they move like real people, which really wasn't a thing. Because even if you go back maybe like not even a decade before that, they would have to move very like stiffly, because the technology wouldn't allow for them to move, organically. It just wouldn't. Maybe the best example would be Silent Hill 2, but that released in the mid 2000s, I'm pretty sure. So yeah, and also like the third person gameplay was revolutionary. So I know. Another thing I think we should talk about is the response of the game. Like how responsive it, like how like the initial reaction to it. And to say it was amazing was an understatement. It was really high selling, and it was overwhelmingly positive when it first came out. And no one really talked about any of its issues because it was just so like defining. A good example is Dead Space. Another very popular horror IP by EA, and I think it was either the developers or the game director said directly that Resident Evil 4 directly inspired Dead Space. And really, Resident Evil 4 basically birthed third-person shooters. I mean, I'm sure if Resident Evil 4 didn't come out, another game may have had it. But Resident Evil 4 was just so advanced, and it really like popularized it with Gears of War and other things. But that was kind of the initial responses, right? It was overwhelmingly positive, similar type of games, right?
Yes, it's like kind of like the father of third-person shooters.
Right. Yeah, you could say that. Just like how Halloween was the birth of the slasher genre, and like other examples like that. And for that's legacy, right, is like, we talked a little bit about it with Dead Space and stuff, but with it has a remake now, and
nominated for Game of the Year.
Yeah, nominated.
All right, well, thanks for coming to the Big Impacts podcast. I'm your host Matthew. This is Michael. This is Aaron. We have Brian behind the camera. Thanks for watching. Boom!